non-traditional questions that you can ask on a first date. What is the greatest lesson that you have learned from suffering? If I am quite transparent, this is probably something that I would not ask on a date that I have no rapport with the person, or maybe save this for the third date. But I kind of want to walk through my thought process here as it relates to seeing someone's humanity. I think this conversation around dating has gone all the way left in terms of transactional relationship dynamics being the only touch point in which people know. And again, we can peel back that onion in a different time. A lot of us have not been seen in our full essence. We've been seen from the lens of what we can do or perform in the name of entrepreneurship or academia or professional accolades and achievement. Also being seen socially. But when we're speaking about that vulnerability, when we're speaking about that raw joy, that raw emotion, what it means to be human, a lot of the conversation, specifically as it revolves around dating, operates in this performative metric. And also through that expectation that is aligned directly to performance, becomes these out of the world like standards and expectations on one's humanity, on one's personhood, not allowing someone to feel or only wanting someone to be vulnerable once they have proven themselves worthy. Hopefully I'm articulating that correctly. But one of the things that I have learned from one of my professors who is an expert in studying suffering, as someone who is becoming an expert in love and relationships in historical narratives, is at the intersection of everything that I do, is that we don't give language, don't give voice, don't give the space in which it is deserving of in terms of our grief or in terms of our suffering. Another thing that I find rather interesting is using myself for example, when a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, Khadijah, like, how did you decide that you wanted to do X, Y, and Z, specifically as it relates to my scholarship and my journey within the academy? If you pay attention close enough, you are understanding my story. The reason that I started working in tech is because I had a deep fate created of me and distributed throughout the place in which I worked. And I had no body to come help me. So I had to find my way out of one of the most traumatic situations. When I reflect back on getting laid off from working at Adobe and transitioning into academia, back into academia, the place in which traumatized me so much. And I understand education as an enterprise and understand it from employee that didn't have protection, right? And didn't know my rights at that time. Understanding the leadership in which I needed, the safe space in which I needed, and to also allow for my suffering to be heard, which is also why the demographic of people that I focus on interviewing is going to be executive leaderships, and understanding how love and leadership are related to each other. Right? And not only leadership within romance, but also leadership within the workplace and within academia. And I find something that's also rather interesting as someone that studies love. And when I say studies love, I want to be quite transparent in my credentials. I attended the top university in the nation for sex therapy. I am academically trained. from the University of Michigan. Okay, I want to be very clear because I think a lot of times it gets like, oh yeah, um, I study relationships because I took a course on, like, no, the university in which I attended was the University of Michigan in human sexuality with a specialty in sex therapy, because I'm also going to get a second doctorate degree, specifically a PhD in human sexuality, studying desire and pleasure. Very important for me to name that. In addition to me going to a R1 university, getting my doctorate degree. Okay? I'm true to this. But I find when it comes to the conversations about love, people never ask me interesting or intriguing questions, or questions around love, or something self-sustaining to them in their love life. Obviously, rightfully so. And I think people assume for me to be like this pseudo Cupid to give them the answers on how to build deeper relationships or make sustainable relationships. And by no means am I a therapist, and I'm not acting as a therapist. I'm a research scientist. I am an educator. But a trend that I see is this ignoring in one's suffering. So many of us have known people to experience great loss, whether it's losing of a parent, losing of a friend, losing of a sibling, losing of a job, losing the reality in which they thought or the pathway, and nobody has really checked on them in a in-depth and consistent manner. And so there's also like this subtle resentment. There's this subtle anger, this silent anger that also people typically ignore because people want to be seen. And I think when we ask questions that speak directly to those places and spaces and those moments in our life where people were willfully ignorant, I think it also adds this space of exhale. And I want to be very clear. If you know you don't have the space of empathy or don't know how to hold space for someone's emotions and don't project onto them, right? This is not going to be the question for you. You have to be honest and transparent in the emotional capacity in which you hold for others. And that capacity, if we're going to speak transparently, varies from person to person. But as we're thinking about deepening relationships, as we're thinking about what does it mean to have a sustainable relationship, what does it mean to be seen in romance, what does it mean to be seen in love, I want you to also consider the depth of your interest in which you have for others or for the person in which you're hoping to fall in love with or fall deeper in love with. I was exposed to this definition of love. Love is the discovering of realities. I have always been navigating life with my understanding of love through this sense of belonging, also like the sense of being seen. But adding that depth of love is discovering realities, the realities in which you share, but also the reality of the past of someone. It deepens your sensitivity. It deepens your intensity and sensuality and intimacy for that person, or if you are into non-traditional relationship dynamics, those people. But I want us to consider, how have we intentionally held space and allowed people to voice the lessons, allowed people to voice their cries, allowed people to be human, allowed people to be seen beyond the performance or the exchange of romance, but to be seen at their humanity, to discover the reality of the lovers in which you yearn for is not solely romance. It's raw, it's emotional, it's sensual, it's vulnerable. And understanding that is also going to be a healthy stretch, an uncomfortable stretch for you, and also how you show up in love, in romance.